Hey guys, directly want to address an inquiry specifically about Christian music, but also secular music as well, just because, well, that'll feed into my next video about Christian freedoms and how we should address certain other topics. But real quick before I get driving here, Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up, edifying others according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. That kind of in a nutshell should be our attitude towards, secular music, because in general, even the stuff that doesn't directly say curse words and whatnot, it is still based upon the life we used to live, the life we left, right? So in a lot of ways, a lot of the old music we listened to, not all of it, but a lot of the old music we listened to was based upon jealousy, greed, hatred, lust, just things of the flesh that tear us down and bring us down. So I think that's a pretty simple one. Obviously, just as with any addiction, just running away from it, cold turkey is kind of hard to do. I won't lie. So that kind of leads me into where Christian music can kind of come into the fore and sort of fill that gap. But also what its place in our life, I think. And again, some of this is subjective. Maybe this is me speaking from my experience in the Bible. It has to be, because this is my whole position with this channel. But I don't want to come across as being dogmatic or as saying anything absolute or exclusive, but I do have some things that I would warn against, and that, I guess, is the main crux of this video. Generally speaking, Christian music is pretty inane when it comes to the moral aspect. Generally, it's fairly on point. That being said, a great deal of it, unfortunately, is very unbiblical. I can get into some particulars. The biggest thing that I find most unfortunate about the majority of Christian music is that it's very incipient as far as the part of faith that it focuses on, just finding faith. And of course, the gospel is absolutely awesome. It's the beginning of everything, but it is the beginning. It's the first step. Paul says that, you guys, I had to feed you milk when you should be on to solid food because you guys have remained childish, essentially. He notes this particular theme a couple different times in a few different places. So I think it's imperative for us to understand that if we rely upon the words and the themes in the majority, not all, the majority of these Christian songs, we're just going to end up being reminded of the first steps of faith, and it's not going to help us move on at all. So my first warning would be, do not think that any Christian music, whether modern or ancient, contemporary, whatever, is at all a substitute for real worship. See my videos on what Christian worship is. Christian worship can involve, singing and dancing and whatnot, but that should be an expression of the Spirit. David dancing through the streets after he destroyed the Philistines. He destroyed the Philistines and was given a great victory, and he was acting kind of foolishly, so much so that he lost, Saul's daughter, Michal, I think is how you pronounce it, as a wife because of his silliness. But he was also honoring God, and God had nothing negative to say about it. So I can't say that singing and dancing is against him. However, that being said, if it's from the position of a person who is very weak and young in their faith, and they're doing it as a replacement for learning and growing in the Word, very bad. That's actually very, very bad. I would say that is the same thing as, getting up and taking a handful of supplements and then sitting on your butt and saying, I exercised and took care of myself. That to me is the same kind of thing. It's absolutely, they're not equivalent. Actually growing in the Word, learning the Word, and doing the Word is not the same thing as turning on a Christian radio station and listening to a song that reminds you of the time when you were saved. Here's the other part that gets me about music. If you guys look in the Old Testament, the majority of the times that you see pagan worship going on, there's always, like the plain of Shinar and in Babylon with Daniel, there's always music involved, and it's always designed to be emotionally manipulative. So if we're in a position where we're feeling weak, or we're not addressing our Christian walk the way we should, we're not staying in fellowship and whatnot, and we're feeling kind of, exposed, or like we're not in line with him, even if we can't put our finger on it, perhaps our conscience is against us because his Spirit is telling us to get in line. We, and I mean modern Christians, tend to put, the musical impression on our emotions. We tend to accredit that to God, like coaxing us and making us feel better, and it's not actually. We have the ability to literally trance ourselves into feelings, and that is not a good thing, guys. That is actually that is kind of a source. That's a source of trickery. It's almost sorcery in and of itself. So that being said, for me, yes, it was very difficult. I'm actually a former professional musician. I love to play trumpet. I love to play guitar. I love to sing. But for me, you know, obviously I'm American, so I was exposed to all kinds of stupid music. Even country music now is absolutely ridiculous. So just as a personal expression of what I've liked and kind of what I've used, I love Third Day, NeedToBreathe. These are bands that I don't think create any more new music, but they have a pretty broad expression of the type, you know, anywhere from folk to kind of like more of a rock style. What's the name of that band? Anyway, there's a couple of rock bands, metal bands that are actually, they're fairly good as far as the doctrine goes. But again, it's all about the initial success of coming to faith. They're more than anything, it's just kind of like, it's something that I use to unaddict myself from the things that I knew I shouldn't be listening to. I still have a difficult time walking away from some of those. And the truth of the matter is, you know, there's still some secular music that I don't know. I like modern types of reggae that don't necessarily sit around talking about drugs. You know, what's the name of that band? Stick Figure. You know, yes, some of their stuff does talk about cannabis use and whatnot, and I don't enjoy those songs just because, you know, if we're gonna be high on anything, it should be on the Lord's love and perhaps the growth and progression and the successes that we have in His name. It should not be on any substance. We're told over and over again to be sober in spirit and not taking in too much wine or any type of inebriant that is going to take our minds off of where we should be in our walk with the Lord and in the Lord Himself. So yes, I do have a few secular things that I listen to, but they're generally pretty inane. What's funny to me about certain reggae songs is they actually talk about a lot of the after effects of our sanctification and like our final journey. They make it sound like, you know, we can sing and talk about heaven on this earth, and the majority of them are unbelievers, by the way. But they're trying their best to look for a heaven that doesn't exist for unbelievers, which to me is a very funny thing. That being said, side note, if you have any little kids, some of the newer Stick Figure stuff is actually really, really light and beautiful sounding. And again, a majority of it, I would say 80%, is actually, I don't want to say doctrinal, but not necessarily anti-God. It's like they're asking for God without His Son, like most people are, but they're doing it in a sweet and kind way. And my conscience is not against me necessarily when I'm enjoying some of that stuff. That being said, I do appreciate some more upbeat stuff, like when I'm exercising and whatnot. But for the most part, I have grown, even as a professional musician, to kind of abstain from music in general, mainly because of the emotional effect that it has on my mind, my psyche, my points of view. I used to love, like, you know, really heavy, fast, you know, stuff, because that's just who I am, and I like it, and I have a really high adrenaline output, so it makes for an interesting experience. But again, it's more like witchcraft and less like a spiritual experience. And I don't want to be, I don't want you guys to think that it's just, you know, willy-nilly this and that, not a big deal, because unfortunately for some of us it's a very big deal, and it's a very big part of our former life as sinners, and we should do all that we can to step away from that. That being said, yes, Christian music is a great substitute for that, especially when you're new, but later on, guys, you're going to find that it's not fulfilling, especially if you're growing in the Word. You're actually going to find yourself, perhaps like me, maybe I'm wrong, but you'll find yourself not being any kind of fulfilled from these things at all. And like movies, TV shows, they just, the more you get to know Him, the more stupid all of them come across to the mind and the conscience, just because that's really what they are. They're filler. Most of this stuff is designed by Satan and his demons to just keep people preoccupied, and it's like a trance. So one further note, Christian radio stations have become almost exactly like going to church. They're exceptionally watered down. The doctrinal things that they try to address are generally very, very unbiblical. The commercials, the commercialism, the pro-Israel stance that they have, it's all very, very, very unbiblical. So if you want to avoid a lot of those influences, I would just say, you know, get a streaming service and try some stuff out, but don't kid yourself. You know, if they say things that are against the Bible or unbiblical, probably not the best thing to be having around, because again, music tends to leave an impression in our mind that seems to sink in even faster than the Word, and that's not a good thing. So unwholesomeness is not good. Commercialism is not good. Anti-doctrinal positions is definitely not good. But in general, you know, music can make a big enough impact in our lives that it's hard to just walk away from it, kind of like eating meat. So that's my take on it. I don't think that there's any great amount of sin in slowly weaning yourself off, but there is also a certain level, just like there is a certain types of sin out there that we just absolutely should avoid. And, you know, you guys have the Spirit and you can feel it. It is likely something that you will easily be able to identify and walk away from. I think POD, that's the name of that band. If you like the heavier stuff, but you don't necessarily want to just go cold turkey, they're actually fairly doctrinal and fairly uplifting. Same thing with Switchfoot. They don't say his name a lot, but they're very much reasonably doctrinal and not terribly anti-Bible, and that's the best we can say of it. Unfortunately, too, you know, the Psalms were actually songs, but we don't know what the music sounded like, and we don't necessarily have the instrumentation or the setup and whatnot. That being said, if you guys can come up with something that involves the Psalms specifically, rock and roll, let me know. I'm all for it. But that being said, I have personally grown to just abstain from music. I'll listen to radio programs or other, you know, biblical stuff, but even then I can't listen to a lot of teachers because they teach a lot of nonsense anymore. So it's a tough world. It is a lonely world the more you walk and the closer to him you get. But there is some use for it. I just wouldn't put any significant amount of emphasis on it for any kind of worship, because it is not, generally speaking, it's great when you're brand new. It is not great when you're growing, because after a while it'll just hold you down. It's more like an anchor. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it there just because I don't want to go on too long. Comment down below, let me know what you think. I'm trying not to be a legalist in these things. I try not to make rules for myself, but I also know that some things edify, some things build you up, some things don't really do anything for you. And then what's the point of having them around? And actually, I'm going to address that in my next video. So comment, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell. Talk to you soon.